Welcome back to This is Thailand. I'm glad you're here. Today's story belongs to a man named Murray Kowalchuk, 52 years old, from Fort McMurray, Alberta, 28 years working the oil sands of northern Canada. Big hands, quiet voice, the kind of man who spent most of his adult life in a work camp trailer, with the heat cranked and the windows frosted over. Now, most of the stories we tell on this channel involve somebody lying, somebody taking, a woman with a second boyfriend, a business partner with a second set of books. This one doesn't have that. Nobody lies to Murray. Nobody steals from him. Every single person in this story acts more or less in good faith, and he still comes within one signature of losing everything he has left in a country where he'd have no way to get it back. The question underneath this one isn't whether he got scammed. It's what a life actually costs, and what happens when you never say that number out loud. Here's his story in his own words. I started in the patch in 1996. I was 22. You want to know what that's like, I'll tell you. But you have to understand it's not one thing. It's the same thing over and over for 28 years. 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Fly in from Edmonton on a plane full of guys who don't want to talk to you, ride the bus out to site, sleep in a room the size of a bathroom, eat in a dining hall with 400 other men, work 12 hours, sleep, do it again. Then fly home and sit in your house for 14 days wondering what to do with yourself. Suncor mostly, some Syncrude, 2 winters at Curl. I did a few years offshore out of St. John's in my 30s because the money was better and I had nothing pulling me back. Cold, I know everybody says Alberta's cold, but I mean the kind of cold where the diesel gel's in the lines and you're out there with a torch warming a fuel filter at 6 in the morning and the sun doesn't come up till 9. And it's gone again by 3. You do enough of those winters and something in your face just sets that way. My brother says I look like I'm squinting at something even when I'm sitting in a kitchen. Here's the thing about camp though, and this is the part people don't get. You can't spend money there. There's nothing to buy. Meals are covered, rooms covered. You're not going out for dinner, there's no dinner to go out to. So you work a rotation, you make good money, and it just sits there, piles up. I wasn't disciplined. I want to be clear about that because people hear he saved 300 grand and they think there's some virtue in it. There wasn't. I just had nowhere to put it. Got married in 2003. Sharon. She was good actually, and I don't say that to be nice about it. It ended in 2011 and it ended quiet. No yelling, no lawyers fighting over the couch. She told me one night that she'd been living alone for 8 years and had finally noticed. Hard to argue. I was gone half of every month, and when I was home, I mostly sat. No kids. That was more or less by drift than by decision. So it's me and a brother in Edmonton, Wayne, who I call maybe twice a year, and the house in McMurray, and the number in the account going up. Now, Dave Prokopchuk, driller. I worked 6 seasons with him, on and off, from about 2009. Good hand. Careful, that matters. I want you to understand I didn't get pitched by some stranger in a parking lot. This was a man I'd stood beside on a rig floor in -38 and trusted with my hands. He'd gotten out around 2019, gone into something on the finance side, and in the spring of 2021 he took me for dinner at a steakhouse in Edmonton. The kind with the leather booths, where the guy comes around with the tray of raw steaks so you can pick. And he had a folder with him, equipment leasing fund, private. They'd buy the gear, lease it back to the service companies working the patch. 14%, backed by hard assets. That was the phrase, backed by hard assets. He said it maybe 3 times, and every time he said it, I nodded, because I know what a hard asset is. I've fixed hard assets. I've slept next to hard assets. The brochure was laminated, I remember that. Little bit heavier than paper, glossy, with a photo of a rig at sunset that I'm fairly sure wasn't even in Alberta. I signed for $340,000. Basically everything. And here's what gets me. Here's the part I've turned over in my head about 900 times since. I can hear a pump going bad. I'm not bragging. It's not a talent. It's just 28 years. You walk past a unit and there's a change in it, a little slap in the rhythm, and you stop and you say that one's got a bearing going and you're right maybe 8 times in 10. That's my whole professional life. Knowing when something's about to fail, And the question I ask about every single piece of equipment I have ever put my hands on, the first question, the only question that actually matters is, what happens when this fails? Not if, when, everything fails. That's the entire premise of maintenance. I never asked it, not once. Not at the steakhouse, not on the phone, not when I signed. I asked what the return was. I asked how long till the first payment. I did not ask the one question I have asked 10,000 times about machines, because it never occurred to me that money was a machine. 14 months, November 2022. I got a letter. Not a phone call from Dave. A letter in an envelope, forwarded from a law office in Calgary, telling me about a bankruptcy filing in a creditor's process in a whole lot of words that took me 2 readings to translate into English. 11 cents on the dollar. That's what came back. About 38 grand of the 340. There was nobody to hate. That's what nobody understands about it. There was no trial, no guy in handcuffs on the news. It just didn't work. Dave lost money too, as far as I know, and he stopped answering after a while and I stopped calling, and that was that. I sat at my kitchen table with a pencil, actual pencil, back of a flyer from the grocery store, and I did the arithmetic. Pension, about $2,900 a month. That's real. That's solid. That's 28 years earning it. What's left? $68,000. After I sold the house and cleared what needed clearing. Cost of living in Fort McMurray, Alberta, Canada, for a 50-year-old man on $2,900 a month, a room in somebody's basement, and being careful about groceries. I did that math maybe 6 times. Kept expecting a different answer. I spent my entire working life in this country, in the worst weather it's got, doing a job that wrecks your back and your knees and your marriage, and at the end of it, I could not afford to live in it. I never told Wayne the real number. He asked, that Christmas. I said I'd taken a hit on a bad investment. He said something about how the markets were rough for everybody and passed me the potatoes. I let him. Gord Sawchuk worked with me at Curl for about 3 years. Instrumentation guy, talked constantly, which balanced out the rest of us. He got out in 2019 and moved to Chiang Mai, and every so often he'd put something on Facebook that I'd scroll past. Then one night in December 2022, this is about 3 weeks after the letter, I was sitting in my kitchen with the heat on, and it was 4 in the afternoon and pitch black outside, and there was a photo of Gord's yard. Rented house, little concrete place with a carport, and a mango tree in the corner of the yard with actual mangoes on it. He'd written something underneath like breakfast with an arrow pointing at the tree. I sat there a long time looking at that. And then because I'm who I am, I messaged him and asked what his rent was. 8,000 baht, which at the time I had to look up. 310 Canadian dollars for a house. Now I want to be clear about something, because I know how this genre goes. I know the story you're expecting. Lonely guy sees palm trees, gets a notion, flies off, chasing something. That wasn't it. I wasn't lonely, or I was, but I'd been lonely since about 2011, and I'd made my peace with it. This was arithmetic. That's all. I sat down and ran it the same way I'd run a pressure calc on a line, which is to say I wrote down what I knew, wrote down what I needed, and looked at the gap. What I knew, $2,900 a month, guaranteed for the rest of my life. $68,000 in the bank once the house was gone. 50 years old, knees shot, back that seizes in the cold, and about 40 years of living left if the Kowalchuk men run true to form. What I needed, somewhere $2,900 a month, is a life instead of a rented room. The gap was about 10,000 kilometers wide. Then I spent 11 months researching it. 11 months. That's the part that gets me now. I gave a man in a steakhouse 90 minutes and $340,000, and I gave a country I'd never seen almost a year of evenings at my kitchen table with a notebook. I learned the visa system. Not sort of learned it. Learned it. Non-immigrant OA, the retirement one. You have to be 50 or over, which I was by about 4 months. You need 800,000 baht sitting in a Thai bank account. Seasoned, meaning it has to be in there for 2 months before you apply and 3 months after, and then maintain a certain balance the rest of the year. 800,000 baht is roughly 31,000 Canadian out of 68. Or alternatively, you can qualify on income, 65,000 baht a month, about 2,500 Canadian. My pension was 2,900, so I actually qualified either way, which is the single luckiest thing in this entire story. And I want to say plainly that a lot of guys don't. A lot of guys get here on the money method, and then the money gets spent, and then they're in trouble. I also learned about the 90-day reporting. Every 90 days you go tell immigration you still live where you said you live. Doesn't matter that you haven't moved. You go. You take a number, you sit. And insurance. This one nearly stopped me. The OA requires health coverage, and quotes at 50 for a guy with a back history and blood pressure were not cheap. I ended up at about 44,000 baht a year, 1,700 Canadian, for something with a deductible that would still hurt if I actually used it. Built it into the budget, underlined it twice. I sold the house in Fort McMurray in September 2023. It went for less than I'd hoped, because everything in that town goes for less than you hoped when the price of oil is doing whatever it was doing that autumn. Sold the truck. Sold most of the tools, which I'll admit bothered me more than the truck. 28 years of accumulating the right sockets, and then a guy hands you $400 for a chest of them. Told Wayne I was going to Thailand for a while. He said for a while, and I said yeah for a while. He didn't push it. We're not a pushing family. I flew out of Edmonton on the 8th of February 2024. Vancouver, then Taipei, then Chiang Mai. Somewhere over the Pacific, about hour 9, I did a thing I'm slightly embarrassed about. I took my boarding pass and turned it over and wrote on the back of it, "No lump sums, ever again. Block capitals." Pen I borrowed from the flight attendant. That was my whole risk management plan, right there. One sentence on a piece of cardstock. I put it in my wallet behind my bank card and it's still there. It's soft now, gone kind of furry at the edges, the way paper gets when it lives in a wallet for 2.5 years. You'll want to remember that piece of paper. It comes back. Getting off the plane in Chiang Mai at 11 at night in February, I'd been trying to imagine the heat for 11 months and I got it wrong. It's not heat like a hot day. It's that the air has weight. You walk out through the doors and it puts a hand on your chest. I stood on the pavement outside arrivals and I started sweating in about 40 seconds, wearing the same jacket I'd needed at -26 that morning in Edmonton. And I laughed out loud. First time in a couple of years, probably. Gord met me, drove me out to a hotel in Hang Dong on the south side, past the airport, and the whole way there were motorbikes going around us on both sides like water around a rock. Families of 4 on one bike, a guy with a ladder, a girl in a school uniform texting at 40 kilometers an hour. Roadside stalls with orange coals going under grills. Smell of charcoal and something sweet and something rotting. All at once, all mixed. Gord said, "You'll hate it for 3 weeks, then you'll be fine." He was about right. I rented a 2-bedroom in Hang Dong for 12,000 baht a month, 480 Canadian. Concrete, tile floors, a carport, a gate. Bought a used Honda Wave for 22,000 baht, $860, from a guy who ran a shop on the road to San Patong. Got a Thai bank account, which took 2 attempts and a letter from immigration, and then I just lived. Badly at first. I couldn't pay a water bill. Genuinely could not do it. Turns out you take the paper to 7-Eleven and they scan it and you hand over cash, and that's it. And it took me 9 days and 2 conversations conducted entirely in gestures to work that out. I ate the wrong things. I ordered som tam once at a stall near the Hang Dong market, and the woman asked me something, and I nodded, confidently, and what arrived removed the top layer of my mouth. She watched me eat the entire plate out of pride and gave me a plastic bag of water with a straw in it, for free, when I was done. Here's the thing, though, and this is the part one hadn't planned for. I liked being useless. Back home, I was a man who should have known better. Everybody in Fort McMurray who knew about the fund, and a few of them did, looked at me a certain way. Not cruel, worse than cruel, careful. Here, nobody expected me to know anything. Nobody knew I'd ever had money. I was just a big slow farang who couldn't pay a water bill, and that was fine. That was allowed. I was 6 weeks in when the shower fitting in the back bathroom started dripping. Late March. And rather than call somebody because I'm me, I got on the Wave and rode up to the hardware place on the main road in Hang Dong to buy the part myself. The hardware place in Hangdong isn't a hardware store the way you'd picture it. It's a concrete room open to the road with fans going, and everything is in bins and on hooks floor to ceiling, and there's a woman at the front behind a glass counter with a calculator and a cat. No signage in English, no system I could work out. I had the old fitting in my pocket, the corroded one, and I was standing in front of a wall of chrome bits trying to match it by eye. There was a woman down the aisle from me buying zippers, handful of them, different lengths going through a box, 40-ish. Hair up with a pen through it, which I noticed because it's an odd thing to do with a pen. I picked a fitting off the hook. She said something. I said, "Sorry?" And she said in English, "That one no good. Same one you have. Break again." I looked at the one in my hand and I looked at the corroded one in my other hand, and she was right. Same manufacturer, same junk plating. I'd have picked the identical part and been back in the shop in 8 months. That's how I met Ploy, standing in a hardware shop in Hangdong, being told I was about to buy the wrong thing by a woman holding zippers. She took me 2 aisles over and showed me a brass one, more expensive, 90 baht instead of 40, $3.50 instead of $1.60. She said, "This one last." Then she paid for her zippers and left on a scooter with a laundry basket bungeed to the back of it. Now here's the thing. She didn't give me her number. She didn't ask me anything. She fixed my plumbing problem for free and went home. I want to sit on that for a second, because for a lot of guys watching this, that's the part that's never happened to them. Every interaction in this country that starts with a Thai woman talking to a Farang first, there's usually a next step. There wasn't one. She just knew about fittings, and I was clearly an idiot. I found her shop about 3 weeks later by accident. Laundry and alterations, front room of a house off the road toward Sampatong, 2 washing machines and an old industrial sewing machine, and a rack of other people's trousers. I'd been getting my washing done at a place near the market that shrank things. Ploy's place was 30 baht a kilo. Fine, I started going there. Her full name is Pornthip. Everybody calls her Ploy, which is what happens here. You meet somebody for 5 years and never learn the name on their ID card. 41. Divorced in 2018 from a Thai guy who's still around somewhere in Lampang. 1 son, bank 19, studying logistics at a university in Bangkok. Her English came from 10 years of tourists, and it's functional and completely fearless. She doesn't care about being wrong, which meant she talked to me a lot more than most people did. 6 days a week, she's got those machines going by 7 in the morning. Sunday, she goes to the temple with her neighbor and then sleeps in the afternoon. 4 months. That's what I keep coming back to. 4 months from that hardware shop before a single baht of mine went anywhere near her. And it wasn't because I was being careful. I was being careful. I'd read every forum thread. I knew the shape of the thing that was supposed to happen. I was waiting for it the way you wait for a bearing to go. Any day now, here comes the sick buffalo. It didn't come. First time we ate together in May at a cow soy place near the Hangdong market. The good one. The one where the old woman fries the crispy noodles fresh and the broth has that skin of red oil on it. She paid. Both of us. 240 baht, $9. I reached for my wallet and she'd already handed the money over. I said I'd get the next one, and she said, "Up to you," and that was the end of it. Second time, same thing. Third time I got there first and gave the woman the money before we sat down, and Ploy laughed at me for about a minute. In June, my wave started running rough, and she arranged for a guy she knew to look at it. Turned out to be a carb clean and a new spark plug, 400 baht. And when I tried to give her the money afterwards, she wouldn't take it because she hadn't paid it. The guy hadn't charged her. They've got some arrangement. I still don't fully understand it. And I'll be honest with you, that disarmed me more thoroughly than anything anybody could have said to me. If she'd told me she loved me in month 2, I'd have been out the door. Instead, she told me my fitting was garbage and refused 400 baht, and by July, I'd stopped watching for the ask altogether. The absence of it did what the presence of it never could have. Around then is when I started paying for things. Me. My idea, nobody suggested it. Dinners mostly and fuel, and I'd pick up groceries. Call it 6,000 baht a month, about $240 Canadian. which for the record is nothing. My budget had 2,000 a month of slack in it. 6,000 baht was less than I used to spend on coffee and truck gas in a fortnight in McMurray. But I put it in a spreadsheet. That's not a personality thing. That's 30 years of filling out timesheets and equipment logs. You track hours, you track parts, you track what went into the machine and when. So I opened a file on the laptop, called it budget, and I put in a column for rent, one for food, one for the bike, one for insurance, one for visa costs, and one I labeled ploy because I didn't have a better word for it. I want to flag that spreadsheet now, quietly, and then leave it alone. It's the reason I'm still here. The expat crowd got involved around this time too. Gord had a Sunday thing at a bar out past the airport, 6 or 8 guys, Leos and a big fan pointed at the table. Good blokes, mostly. And the second I mentioned there was a woman, out came the catechism. How'd you meet her? What does she do? Has she got a family up country? Has she asked for money yet? I said no. And one of them, a Yorkshireman named Phil, said, not yet. 2 words. Said it into his beer, not even looking up. The thing is, Phil wasn't wrong. Money did eventually go north. Phil was right about the fact and wrong about everything underneath it. And I couldn't have explained the difference then, and I can barely explain it now. What I did notice, sitting at that table, was that 4 of those 6 men were bitter in a way that had set, like concrete. They'd been here 8, 12, 15 years, and they'd built an entire worldview out of one bad experience each, and they polished it every Sunday and served it to any new guy who sat down. I made a decision that afternoon riding home. I wasn't going to become that. Whatever happened, I wasn't going to end up a 60-year-old man in a bar telling a stranger the same story about a woman from 2011. By October 2024, Ploy had a toothbrush at my place, then a drawer, then most of a wardrobe. She kept the shop and kept the house it's attached to. That was never in question. That shop is hers, and it's her whole standing in the world. And I was happy. That's the flat truth of it. First time since about 2009. Which frightened me, actually, more than any of the rest of it. Because the last time I felt certain about something, I signed for $340,000. She'd been talking about her mother for months before I ever met her. Not asking. Talking. The way you'd mention weather. Then in November 2024, she said she was going up for a few days, and did I want to come? And I said, yeah. And that's how I ended up in a pickup truck heading north on the 118 with a laundry basket of clean folded shirts between my feet because there was nowhere else to put them. 4 hours to Chiang Rai, then another 40 minutes past it, off the main road, down a lane with dogs on it. I'll describe the house because I think it matters. Wooden up on concrete posts, corrugated roof, open underneath where the shade is and where everything actually happens. That's where the plastic chairs are, and the water jars and an old chest freezer that ran off an extension cord. Concrete water tank at the side with a moss line on it. Spirit house on a post out front with a little glass of red Fanta and some marigolds going brown. Roosters from about 4 in the morning. A dog under the house that groaned in its sleep. It's not poverty the way I'd have used the word. Nobody was hungry. There was a truck. There was a TV. But it's the kind of place where a thing that costs 300 baht gets thought about for a week. Her mother is Somjai, 68, type 2 diabetes, diagnosed years back, managed the way a lot of people manage it up there, which is to say partially. Tiny woman, about up to my chest. She looked at me for a long moment when I came under the house and then said something to Ploy, and Ploy laughed and wouldn't tell me what it was for 3 days. It was about my size. Apparently I looked like a water buffalo that had learned to stand up. The brother's nut, 34, drives a pickup for an outfit that moves vegetables down to the markets. Long days up before light, gone a week at a stretch sometimes. Good bloke. Quiet in a way I recognized, actually. We got along fine without ever having much of a conversation, which is my favorite kind of getting along. And then nieces and nephews, cousins, a woman next door who may or may not have been related, kids running through with those plastic water guns. Never did work out the exact family tree. Don't think anybody was keeping one. Here's what I noticed and misread. They put me first. Every time. First chair, the good one with the cushion. Serve first at every meal, before Somjai, before anybody, And I found that uncomfortable because in the patch you eat when you eat and nobody's before anybody. Nut poured my whiskey before his own. When I stood up, somebody moved a fan. I took that as warmth. It was warmth. That part's true. But it was also something else, and it took me about a year and a half to work out what. A farang in the family raises the whole house in that village. Everybody up the lane knows Somjai's daughter has a foreigner. That's status, and status is real currency there. And I was walking around inside it without understanding I was wearing it. Nobody was faking anything. Both things were happening at once. I just only saw the one I liked. The money conversation, and I want to be precise here, because this is the bit everybody gets wrong about these stories. The money conversation was mine. I raised it. Not Ploy, not Somjai, not Nut. I'd read about it for 11 months at a kitchen table in Fort McMurray. Eldest daughter supports the parents. That's not a scam. That's the pension system. There isn't much of another one. Ploy had been sending money north since she was about 19 years old, long before any farang turned up in a hardware shop, and she'd have kept doing it if I'd never existed. So on the second evening, sitting under the house with a glass of hong tong and soda and about 900 moths going at the light, I said to Ploy that I'd like to put in 10,000 a month for her mum. 10,000 baht. About 400 Canadian. She said no. Twice, actually. Properly no, not a polite no. She said her mother is her mother and it's her job. And I said something like, I know it's your job, I'm asking to help with your job, and eventually she said okay, but I had to tell her if it was ever a problem. I said it wouldn't be a problem, that was true. $400 out of $2,900 is 14%, and my whole cost of living at that point was running about $1,100 a month all in. Rent, bike, food, insurance amortized. I had slack. I put a new row in the spreadsheet, labeled it, and went to bed feeling like the most sensible man in northern Thailand. Now, the bits I skated past. Nut asked me, that same trip, what I'd done for work in Canada. I said oil. He whistled, just a low one, half joking, and said something to his cousin, and the cousin looked over at me and grinned. Oil, in that village, in that word is a picture. And the picture is not a 52-year-old man with a maintenance ticket and a bad back doing shift work in a camp. The picture's closer to a man who owns something. I heard the whistle. I remember hearing it. And I didn't say anything, because what was I going to say? Hang on, let me explain Canadian income tax and the price of a house in Fort McMurray. You don't. Not through a translation, not at a party, not when everyone's being nice to you. Same trip, a cousin asked, did I own a house in Canada? And I said, no, I sold it. Which is true, it's completely true. It also lands in that yard as, he sold a house. He has a house's worth of money sitting somewhere. It never occurred to me that a true sentence could be a lie by omission, and it never occurred to me because I'm from a place where, if you don't volunteer your finances, people assume you'd rather not say. Different assumption entirely. And the word farang. I heard it about me maybe 40 times that first trip. Mostly harmless, it's just the word. But there's a way it gets used with a little weight in it, a little assumption, and I clock that weight and I let it go past because correcting people isn't something I do. Never has been. I let a foreman tell me the wrong torque spec once for 2 weeks rather than say it in front of the crew. That's not a Thai problem, that's a Murray problem. Take it with you wherever you go. We went up 4 or 5 more times through the first half of 2025. Songkran in April, soaked to the skin, a bucket down the back from a 9-year-old, best day I'd had in 15 years. A temple thing in May where I gave money in an envelope because everyone else was. Somjai started sending things back down with Ploy for me. Dried fish, a bag of tamarind, once a shirt that didn't fit. By June 2025, I had 16 months in the country, and the spreadsheet said this. Everything I'd spent on Ploy and her family since I met her, all in, dinners, the monthly, the bits and pieces, came to about $9,800 Canadian. 16 months, 600 and change a month, average. Affordable, sustainable, tracked to the bot. I remember looking at that total on the laptop one night with the fan going and thinking, this works. The math works. 28 years and a steakhouse and a form letter, and at 52 years old, the arithmetic finally works. I was right too. That's the annoying part. Everything 1-500 built up to June 2025 was sound. It's what came in August that I hadn't put a row in for. August 2025. Nut called Ploy at about 6 in the morning, and I could hear her voice change from the other room before I understood a single word of it. Somjai had a wound on her foot. She'd had it for a while and hadn't mentioned it, which is the thing about diabetes in a village. You don't feel it, so it isn't happening. By the time somebody looked properly, it had gone into the tissue and there was a red line tracking up past the ankle. The government hospital in Chiang Rai gave her a 3-week wait for the vascular consult. 3 weeks. With a foot like that, 3 weeks is how you lose a foot. So we drove north and put her in the private hospital instead. 2 weeks in, antibiotics through a line, 2 rounds of debridement, a specialist, the whole thing. 85,000 baht, 3,400 Canadian. I paid it standing at a counter on the ground floor with a card next to a vending machine that sold soy milk while a man mopped the floor around my feet. And I want to tell you honestly how that felt, because I don't think it's what you'd expect. It felt fantastic. Not the situation. The situation was awful. She was in a lot of pain and frightened, and there's a particular smell to those wards that I won't describe. But the paying, handing over $3,400 and having something actually happen. A foot stayed on a woman's leg because I had money, and I gave it to a hospital. Do you understand what I'm saying? $340,000 of mine went into a folder in a steakhouse and produced nothing. Not a shed, not a bolt. 11 cents on the dollar and a form letter. 85,000 baht produced a foot. First time since November 2022 that my money had done a single useful thing in the world, and I'd have paid it twice. Ploy cried in the corridor and then apologized for crying, which tells you most of what you need to know about her. But something changed in that hospital, and it took me 9 months to see it. I became the one who fixes things. Nobody announced it. Nobody could have. That's not how it works. It's Kreng Jai. And I'd read the word 100 times and thought I understood it, and I didn't. It's not politeness. It's a whole load-bearing structure. You don't put a burden on someone. You don't make them uncomfortable. You don't put them in a position where they might have to say no and lose face. So you don't ask. Which sounds lovely until you realize it also means nobody will ever tell you when you're doing too much. There's no brake on that system. The brake has to be you. Autumn goes past. Little things. Ploy's nephew, Somjai's grandson, needed fees and a uniform for the new term. 15,000 baht, $580. Nobody asked me. It came up at dinner, mentioned in passing, and I said I'd take care of it, and everyone said no, 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 for exactly the correct number of rounds, and then said thank you. November Nuts pickup, his own one, not the company one, needed a clutch. 8,000 baht, 300 bucks. Same shape of conversation. January, an old woman up the lane died, and there was a funeral. 3 days of it, monks in a tent, and food for everybody, and the family put in, and I put in 5,000. Each one of those on its own, I'd defend to you right now. That's the thing. Take any single one, and I'd say the same thing again. $580 for a kid's schooling. Are you joking, of course? Here's the one that actually matters, though, and it's not any of those. Around October 2025, I stopped updating the spreadsheet every month. That's it. That's the red flag. Not the money. The money was still fine. The spreadsheet. I'd built the thing in July 2024 and filled it in on the first of every month like a shift log for 20 months straight. And then somewhere in that autumn, I started doing it every second month. And then I'd do a catch-up when I remembered. And then by February 2026, there were entries that just said Ploy Fam Miss with a rounded number in them. Rounded. I'd started rounding. 30 years of equipment logs, and I know exactly what it means when a man starts rounding his numbers. It means he doesn't want to know the number. It's not laziness. It's the opposite of laziness. It takes effort to stay that vague. I noticed at the time, sort of. Told myself I'd tidy it up. That's a Murray problem, too. Then March 2026, we went up for a Sunday. And up. Big lunch, everybody there. Somtam and larb and sticky rice in the baskets and Nut doing whiskey and soda in those plastic cups. Hot as anything. Fans going under the house and it not making much odds. After the food, Nut got up and came back with a piece of paper and put it on the mat in front of me. Hand-drawn floor plan, ruler lines. Somebody had spent real time on it. 4 rooms, a proper bathroom on the inside of the house instead of out the back, a concrete porch, tiles marked out on the floors, even the little squares for windows drawn in. A house, a proper concrete house for Somjai, on the family land, 20 meters from where the wooden one stands. And the whole table lit up, everyone talking at once, pointing at bits of it, the aunties in on it, Ploy's mother's 2 sisters, who I'll be honest, I'd never fully clocked as a power in that family until that afternoon. Somebody said 1.8 million baht. I did the conversion in my head while smiling. 72,000 Canadian dollars. I had at that point about 29,000. Nobody asked me. Nobody said, Murray, will you pay for this? The paper was just put down in front of me, and the conversation happened over the top of it, with me in it. Warmly as a participant, and every so often somebody would look at me and I'd nod, because what else does your face do? I said I'd think about it. That's what I said. 4 words. And then I sat there for another 2 hours eating sticky rice while a 9-year-old climbed on me. 4 weeks after that were the worst 4 weeks I've had since the letter. I've been on a rig floor knowing something was wrong. You can't always say what. There's a pitch that's off, a vibration through the deck plate that shouldn't be there, and you stand there with your hand flat on a rail, and everything in you says shut it down, and you've got nothing to write on the form. That's what those 4 weeks were. A wrongness with no words attached to it, and everybody around me happy. I took my wallet out one night in April and pulled the boarding pass out from behind the bank card. 2 years of pocket wear on it, furry at the edges, no lump sums. Ever again. Read it about 4 times. Then I did what I should have done in a steakhouse in Edmonton in 2021. I went and asked a professional. Thai law firm in the old city in Chiang Mai, a young woman with very good English, 1,500 baht for an hour. I asked her whether, if I put money into a house on that land, my name could go on anything. She was kind about it. She'd clearly had the conversation before. Foreigners cannot own land in Thailand. Not through a girlfriend, not through a wife, not through a company structure that a lawyer with a straight face will set up for you and a Thai court will look straight through. There's a usufruct, there's a 30-year lease you can register. She walked me through both, and she was honest that they help and that neither of them is ownership, and that if things go bad in 5 years, the building is on somebody else's ground and you're a 55-year-old man with a receipt. I said thank you and paid the 1,500 baht and rode home in the heat. Songkran was 3 days later. Songkran in the village is 3 days, and it is not the tourist version. There's some of that. The kids on the lane with buckets and hoses, everybody soaked from about 9 in the morning, a pickup going past slow with a barrel of water in the back, and 8 teenagers in it screaming. But mostly it's family coming home. Everybody who works in Bangkok or Chiang Mai turns up, the house fills, and the actual point of it is the older people. You pour scented water over your grandmother's hands and ask her to forgive you for the year. I did that. Somyai's hands, the little bowl with the jasmine floating in it, my knees on a concrete step. Second year I'd done it. Ploy walked me through the words phonetically, and I got them about 60% right, and Somjai laughed and patted my head like I was a large dog. I had that floor plan sitting in me the whole time like a swallowed stone. Second night. It's late, maybe 11. The kids have finally gone down. Everyone's under the house on the mats. There's a speaker playing Luke Thung off somebody's phone. The string of little lights not hung up. Moths absolutely hammering the bulb. Smell of the mosquito coil and whatever was left of the grilled pork. Hong thong and soda, and the ice in the bucket had gone to that soft slush stage. Nut came and sat down on the step next to me. He'd had a fair bit. Not gone, but loosened. And he sat there for a while not saying anything, which suited me. And then he said in English, "Murray, can I ask you a thing?" I said, "Sure." He said, "How much money do you have?" Now. 2 years in that country, and nobody had ever asked me that. Not Ploy, not Somjai, not a soul. Hearing it out loud from Nut on those steps was like hearing somebody swear in a church. I said something like, "Not as much as you think," and he nodded slowly, and then he said the thing I've been chewing on ever since. He said the family always thought I was rich, that when Ploy first said she had a farang, the aunties decided within a week what that meant. Then when they found out I'd worked in oil in Canada, that settled it. Oil in Canada. He said his cousin had looked up what oil workers earn in Canada on his phone and shown everybody the number. I said, that's the gross number for a good year. There's tax. There's a mortgage. There's 28 years of living. He said, yes, but nobody know this. And then he said, and I want to get this right, because he was picking his words carefully in his second language, half drunk, at 11 at night. And I think it cost him something to say it. He said that nobody had ever asked me because you don't ask. That asking a man how much he has is the same as telling him you think he might not have enough. It shames him. So you don't ask ever, and you just guess, and you go on guessing forever. Then he said Ploy didn't know either. That one took a second to land. He said Ploy had told the family I was comfortable, because that's the word I'd used about myself, that being all she had to go on. 2 years together, and she'd never asked me either. Not once. Same reason. Worse reason, actually. She's the one who'd have to live with having asked. And then he told me the house wasn't her idea. It came from the aunties. It had been going round the family since about Christmas. And Ploy had been fighting it quietly for a month and losing, because she's a daughter and they're her mother's sisters, and she's 41, and none of that counts for much against 2 women in their 70s. He said, she not happy about this. She don't tell you. Then he said sorry, twice. And then he got up and went to bed, and I sat on those steps with the moths going at the light until about 2 in the morning. Here's the thing I have to explain properly, because I know what you're expecting at this point in one of these stories. There was nothing to find. Nobody had a second boyfriend. Nobody had another farang on the go. Nothing was faked. No story was invented. There was no sick buffalo that didn't exist. Somjai's foot was real, and the fees were real, and the affection in that house, I'll swear to this, was real. What there was a room full of decent people who had made a reasonable guess about a man's finances in the total absence of any information whatsoever. And the only person in the world who could have given them that information was me. 2 years. 2 years of sitting in the good chair being served first, and I never once said a number out loud. Not to Ploy, not to Somjai, not to Nut. I let them all guess, and then I got quietly hurt in the small hours when the guess came back wrong. We drove home to Hangdong on the Wednesday. I didn't say much. Ploy asked twice if I was sick. Then I did the thing I actually know how to do. I opened the laptop on the kitchen table with the fan going, and I opened Budget to Eat, and I went back and rebuilt the whole thing from scratch. 2 days. Bank statements printed at the branch on the main road, the transfer history in the app, screenshots, receipts out of a drawer. Every missing line, every rounded number, I went and found the actual transaction and put the actual figure in. Hospital fees, clutch, funeral, the monthly to Somjai, dinners, the trips north, fuel, the lot. That's a maintenance log. That's all it is. You don't guess what went into the machine? You go and look at the parts book. 26 months, February 2024 to April 2026. Total gone to Ploy and her family, $41,000 Canadian. Not $41,000 of waste. $41,000 of things I mostly still stand behind, but $41,000? Left in the account, $27,000. Started with 68, and here's the number that actually stopped me because it isn't in the spreadsheet. My pension is $2,900 a month, and my cost of living is about $1,100. That leaves $1,800. To rebuild $27,000 from zero, if I spent nothing at all on anybody, would take about 15 months. To rebuild 41 takes 2 years of a life with nothing in it. I cannot earn. I'm on an OA. I can't legally work here. That's the whole architecture of the thing. A retirement visa is a promise that you will never need money again. So then I put the house on the sheet. Hypothetically, bottom row. 1.8 million baht, $72,000, against 27,000 available. I couldn't have paid it. That's the first thing. Even if I'd wanted to, even if I'd said yes at that lunch with everyone's face turned to me, I did not have it and never had. I'd have had to say no eventually, 3 months in, halfway through a foundation, with a hole in the ground and everybody's face on the line, including mine. And if I'd somehow found it, if I'd emptied everything and borrowed the rest, 52 years old, zero in the bank, a concrete house standing on land that is legally, permanently in every possible configuration, not mine and never can be, a visa that requires money I no longer have, 10,000 kilometers from a country I sold my house in. I sat and looked at that bottom row for a long time, and then it came up on me sideways, the way these things do, and I actually laughed out loud alone at a kitchen table at 1 in the morning with the fan going. Steakhouse in Edmonton, leather booth, laminated brochure, same failure, word for word, beat for beat. A man I trusted in a room where everyone was being nice to me, and a number I never interrogated because interrogating it would have been rude. I didn't ask Dave Prokopchuk what happens when this fails. I didn't ask Ploy's family what they thought I had. 28 years diagnosing machines by sound, and the one question I cannot ask on any continent, in any language, is the one where somebody might look at me funny for asking it. I drove up on the 11th of May, alone. Ploy thought I was going to look at a second-hand water pump for the neighbor, which was true but not the reason. I brought the spreadsheet, printed it at a copy shop near the Hangdong Market. 9 pages, stapled, and a bit of paper with 3 numbers on it in big writing, because I knew my English would go to pieces and Ploy would have to translate, and I wanted the numbers to sit on the mat where everyone could see them. I asked Nut to get the aunties there. Under the house, 4 in the afternoon, hot as anything. That time of day when the light comes in sideways and everything's the color of weak tea. The fan clicking round. Somjai in her chair with her foot up, because it healed but it never went back to what it was. And I told them, $340,000, I said. That's what I had. I gave it to a man I trusted in a restaurant in Canada, and I never asked him one question about it, and 14 months later it was gone. I got back $38,000. There was no crime. Nobody went to jail. I was just stupid. Ploy translating, her voice doing something odd on the numbers. I said, my pension is 2,900 Canadian dollars a month. That's about 68,000 baht. Every month, forever. And I cannot earn 1 baht more because it's illegal for me to work here. I said, I had $68,000 when I came. I have $27,000 now. And I said, the house costs $72,000. I don't have it. I have never had it. If I say yes to you today, I am lying to you, and you'll find out in the middle of it when there's a hole in the ground. Then I put the 9 pages down on the mat. I've had some bad silences in my life. That one went on about 11 seconds, and it was the worst. And then Somjai started talking, fast to Ploy, and Ploy wouldn't translate. And I said, what? What's she saying? And Ploy said, her mother wanted to know if I'd been eating. That's it. That was the response. 68-year-old woman finds out the Farang isn't rich, and the first thing out of her is, have you been eating properly because you gave us money and you look thinner than at Songkran? I had to go and stand by the water tank for a minute. Nut said sorry. He said it about 4 times, and each time I said, no, no. You're the only one in this family who ever asked me a straight question. Don't you dare apologize. The aunties were embarrassed, properly embarrassed, and I regret that. I do. That's face. And I'd taken some off them in front of everybody without meaning to. One of them didn't speak to me for 2 months. She does now. Ploy went into the house and didn't come out for a while, and when she did, her eyes were red and she was angry. At me, not about the money. She could not have cared less about the money. She was angry that for 2 years she'd been carefully, deliberately not asking me anything, and being proud of herself for it. Because not asking was how she showed me she wasn't like the stories, that she wasn't one of those. And the whole time she'd been letting her family build a picture out of nothing while I sat there and said nothing and let it happen. She said, in English, you let me be stupid. Yeah, I did. That's the one that still gets me, actually, not the money. So here's what happened after. No house. The floor plan is gone. I don't know where. What we did instead, a proper metal roof on the wooden house because the corrugated stuff was going, and a solar water heater and a new pump. 40,000 baht all in, $1,600. Nut and I did most of the fitting ourselves over 2 weekends, and I have never been happier holding a spanner. The monthly to Samjai went up, not down, 12,000 baht now, about $480. Because when I actually sat down and looked at it with Ploy, properly, both of us with the real figures in front of us, we agreed that was what I could carry indefinitely without touching the 27. And we wrote it down. I know, a contract. With people I love, Ploy typed it in Thai, and I did the English underneath, and we printed 2 copies, and everybody signed it, including the aunties. And if you want to know what a farang looks like at peak absurdity, it's a 52-year-old Albertan getting his girlfriend's mother's sisters to initial a piece of A4 under a wooden house in Chiang Rai province. It says the amount. It says it gets reviewed every January. It says medical emergencies get discussed, not assumed. And it names the amount above which we all sit down before anybody spends anything. Stupidest feeling thing I've ever done, and everything got about 40 kilos lighter afterwards. That's July 2026. 2.5 years since I landed. 27,000 in the bank, and it hasn't moved in 3 months. Budget balances on the pension alone, with about 400 a month spare. 90-day report done in June. Sat in that chair with a number ticket for an hour and a half. Same as everyone. I do 2 mornings a week for a bloke who runs a guest house near San Pa Tong. Pumps, aircon, whatever falls off. He pays me in food and beer and about 900 baht, which is not legal employment and is also not enough money to be anything except a reason to get up. Don't tell immigration. He's got a Yamaha generator from 1991 that I have brought back from the dead twice. Ploy's still got the shop, machines going at 7. Bank finishes in Bangkok next year. We're not married, talked about it. If we do, it'll be at the Amphor with the paperwork done properly and both our numbers on the table first, and everybody will know what everybody has before anyone signs anything. And I'll pay a sin sod that we've all agreed on, out loud, in advance, and it will be small. So, the question, is Thailand worth the cost? Here's my answer, and it's not the one you want. Thailand didn't cost me anything. $41,000 bought me a foot that stayed on a woman's leg, a kid in school, a roof that doesn't leak, and 2.5 years of not being the man in Fort McMurray who everyone looks at carefully. That's not a cost. That's the best value I've had for money in my entire life. And I've got the spreadsheet. What nearly killed me, twice on 2 continents, was silence about money. Nobody lied to me. Not Dave in that steakhouse, not one person in that village. Both times I walked into a room full of people being nice to me, and I handed them a blank space where a number should have been, and they filled it in with whatever seemed reasonable. And then I got quietly wounded when their guess was wrong. You are not being polite when you don't say your number. You're not being modest. You're outsourcing the arithmetic of your own life to people who are guessing. Say the number. Early, out loud. To her mother, to her aunties. It will be the most humiliating 10 minutes of your life, and it is cheaper than everything else on this channel. That's it. That's the whole thing. Took me $340,000 and a foot ulcer to work out. Murray Kowalchuk is still in Hang Dong. He asked us to point out twice that he's not offering advice. He's just the guy who nearly did it wrong twice. Most of the stories on this channel end at an airport. A man on a plane with a bag, going home to a country he'd already left. This one doesn't, and the difference wasn't luck, and it wasn't that his family were kinder than anyone else's. Plenty of the men in those other stories had good people around them too. The difference was one conversation he was terrified to have, and had anyway, about 4 weeks before it would have been too late. Family support in Thailand is real. It is not a scam, and it is not a trick. It's how an entire generation of parents gets looked after in a country where the pension is what it is. Eldest daughters carry it their whole lives, farang or no farang. The failure mode almost never looks like malice. It looks like a decent man in a good chair, being served first, who never once corrected an assumption that was quietly compounding underneath him. So say the number. Whatever it is, say it before somebody draws you a floor plan. Thanks for watching. This is Thailand.